Member for Cochin Valley.
Honourable Speaker, in spite of the fact that I am going to support these changes, they're basically common sense changes that are long overdue. And this government, in my opinion, Honourable Speaker, has blood on their hands. Because at the end of the day, this government was proud of the fact back in 2002, they were proud of deregulating WCB regulations. They took pages out of the regulation book and threw them in the garbage.
Withdraw that word, please. Yeah, let's have temperance in the House. You know, it is absolutely essential. That's the hallmark of this House. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. You know, I, for far too long, have seen what's happened in workplaces when, at the end of the day, the concerns of workers are ignored. And let's talk about what happened in the Prince George area back in 2010, Honourable Speaker. 2010. There was a WorkSafe training session in Richmond. And guess who was trained, Honourable Speaker?
The remarks that you made earlier, please withdraw those.
I withdraw the remarks.
Thank you. Continue.
Honourable Speaker, back in 2010, in the Richmond office of WorkSafe, there was a training session held, and guess who was there? It included a hygiene officer from the Prince George area, and they were getting training about explosive dust, Honourable Speaker. This is 2010. In 2011, there were 3 dust explosions in the Prince George area. 3, Honourable Speaker. This wasn't news. And by the way, the regulations from the United States are full of dust explosions. We've had dust explosions on the coast of British Columbia. We had an electrician open a panel box, and as a result of the dust flowing out of there and the arc that was, his eyeballs were glued together, Honourable Speaker. His eyeballs were glued together. This is years ago. Back in the 1970s, any sawmill on the coast of British Columbia you could go into, and guess what you would find? You would find a spark watcher, an assigned person whose job it was to look for sparks when they were working around dust. And there's lots of places with dust, whether it's planer mills or sawmills. Dust is not some new invention, some new problem. And what's really shocking to me and unacceptable, Honourable Speaker, is to find out, I just phoned this morning and asked the steel workers, why did the workers' representative walk away from the hearing? Why did the people that are there that represent unionized workers walk away from the process that's going on? And let me tell you in their own words, I heard from Steve Hunt. I said, what's going on? And he said, well, there's no point in being part of a process that is basically a whitewash. It's a whitewash for the government. This is political interference as far as I'm concerned. It's covering up what happened at WorkSafe BC, which is an absolute tragedy, Honourable Speaker. It's a tragedy what's going on. At the end of the day, just 3 months, okay, back in January of 2012, an explosion at the Babine Forest Products Mill in Burns Lake killed 2 workers and injured dozens more. Just 3 months later, on April 23, 2012, another explosion at the Lakeland Sawmill in Prince George, BC, killed 2 more workers and left others with life-changing trauma and injury. And let's again go back to the notion, this is not some new surprised event, explosions in mills. They'd had explosions in mills where there was dust, and there's no question that the WCB, or the WorkSafe BC, had been discussing this internally. And one of the things that came out, Honourable Speaker, one of the things that came out is during the inquest was that a document by a man named Nakahara concludes on February 27th of 2012. This is before the Lakeland explosion. But he had concluded that wood dust was the cause of the explosion at Babine, and he goes on in his memo to talk about dust enforcement strategy, but it says because of the pushback by the industry, they would not enforce. Honorable Speaker, this, if there was ever a smoking gun about that kind of cover-up activity, it's unbelievable, Honorable Speaker, that kind of stuff could happen. And who's there for the workers, Honorable Speaker? Who's there for the workers?
Member, please take your seat. And let me remind members, debate at second reading is about the general principles of the bill. Temperance and moderation are the hallmarks of parliamentary debate.
Honorable Speaker, in my career, I've gone to investigations and witnessed forest workers that have lost their lives. I'm sorry if I get a little passionate about it, but if you too, Honorable Speaker, had been on the work site and actually seen the workers.
The principles underlying Bill 9, Workers' Compensation Act 2015. Please address your remarks accordingly.
The bill, again, I point out that at the end of the day, this is a move in the right direction. And I acknowledge that the minister responsible has ordered the report, McAtee report. They're starting to move in the direction of putting back some of the safeguards that will help forest workers and their families. But, Honorable Speaker, I think the very fact that this legislation needs to be done in 2015, we went through years and years during the dirty 30s all the way up to including back in 2005, the last big event that I attended with the government of the day when I was representing steelworkers, and we were talking about the tragic increase in the number of deaths in the forest industry. And guess what the problem then was, Honorable Speaker? The problem then was the fact that fallers, and the evidence at the Gramlich hearing was that the contractor signed off on the responsibility for the safety on the hood of a truck while it was pouring rain, and he took on the safety responsibility. But he didn't know, he claimed he didn't know that he couldn't go to work in the fog, and we ended up with a faller bled out on the side hill because there was fog. The nearest helicopter couldn't even fly to him because there was fog. And the negligence is the lack of enforcement, compliance, and the ignorance of safety rules and guidelines being important. Honorable Speaker, I get emotional because I know that those regulations and safeguards were written in blood, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Member, the principles of Bill 9. Workers' Compensation Amendment Act.
Those principles are now starting to come back. We're starting to put back some kind of regulations, but there's compliance enforcement, a $1,000 fine. We're going to have a $1,000 fine, Honorable Speaker. But we heard this back in 2002. We heard there were going to be $1 million fines if people weren't complying. $1 million fines and people would go to jail. That's what this government told the people of BC. But at the end of the day, what we have here, Honorable Speaker, is the WorkSafe BC failing to work together with the forest workers involved in the industry. In his letter, Mr. Hunt says, "We have struggled to have our concerns and our voice heard by WorkSafe BC. We were only successful after directly appealing to then Labour Minister Margaret McDermott and threatening to shut down the BC forest industry." What? Really, Honorable Speaker, to get a bill like this to press for now we got the McAtee report, again, that's headed in the right direction, and we're going to support it at the end of the day. And again, I apologize if people dying upsets me. I worked in the forest industry all those years, Honorable Speaker. I worked in the forest industry, and I went to one too many death investigation, and the story is all too familiar. Oh, somehow we didn't know anything about it. Workplaces are a dangerous place. We accept that. There's some level of risk. You're never going to do away with all of the risk. Not all of the risk, but when you know that explosions happen, back in 2010, when you have the hygiene officer for the Prince George area getting training in explosive dust, and then that doesn't translate into going around the mills, taking a look at the beams, taking a look at what's going on, making sure that they're actually dealing with the dust problem, making sure that there's sufficient activity and devices on the work site to deal with the level of dust. Particularly at Lakeland. And I'm sorry, Minister, I know you come from there, and I get it. I am not, Minister, trying to hurt you in any way, shape, or form. I'm sure it's emotional. You've dealt with those family. But it's also emotional for the people at Babine that went through their tragedy. And then we learned nothing over 3 months. There was no alert went out, no red alert that said, you've got to get out there and stop this. Well, if there was so, Honorable Speaker, how come it happened again? It should have been prevented in the first place. Are we just waiting? Are we going to hear again, oh, well, we've done some things? You know, this legislation is a move in the right way, Honorable Speaker, the summary of Bill 9. But then you hear from the steelworkers that their members and the families and communities were once assured by WorkSafe BC they would conduct the most thorough and exhaustive investigation in their history. And on November 29th, WorkSafe BC disclosed in its investigations into both explosions, Babine and Lakeland, that they were complete and would be submitted to the criminal justice branch for determination of charges under the Act, under the legislation. At no time was there any consideration of charges under the criminal code, in particularly the Westbury provisions regarding employer corporate negligence. During the 2013 provincial election campaign, it was revealed that in January of that year, at the direction of the BC Liberal ministers, the BC Safety Authority was ordered to suppress its investigative report into Babine sawmill explosion, notionally to not jeopardize any criminal or WorkSafe BC investigations that were underway at the time.
Noting the hour.
Well, we're close. On January 10th, the Criminal Justice Branch announced it would not be laying charges against Babine and made similar pronouncement a short while later. Noting the hour, Honourable Speaker, I move adjournment of the debate and look forward to the opportunity to continue.